After 36 years of marriage, I discovered that my wife was living a completely different life behind my back. The truth came out not through some dramatic fight in the accidental discovery of evidence, but through careful planning and hiring a professional to keep a close eye on her every move. My wife works as a branch manager at a regional bank, a job she got after retiring from the Air Force after 20 years. I had always been proud of her military service and thought the Air Force had taught her values like honor and honesty. We got married when we were both 22, right after college graduation, full of dreams about spending our whole lives together. She was finishing her last semester when I proposed, and we planned our wedding around her graduation and joining the military. The early years were tough as we navigated military life, frequent moves, and the demands of her career, while I established my insurance business. Our first child was born when she was stationed in Colorado, and our second came 3 years later during her assignment in North Carolina. Both of our kids are now grown with families of their own, living in different states and only visiting during holidays. Our son works as a paramedic in Texas, while our daughter teaches elementary school in Oregon. For 36 years, I believed we had survived every challenge that military life and civilian careers could throw at us. I supported her through deployments, career changes, and raising kids while managing our busy schedules. When she retired from the Air Force 8 years ago, I thought our relationship would strengthen without the pressures of military life. Instead, her bank job started taking more and more of her time, leaving less room for us to connect as a couple. The first warning sign appeared 18 months ago when she began working late several nights each week. She said her boss required her to work extra hours to meet important deadlines and projects. This seemed reasonable because banks have strict rules and lots of paperwork that often extends beyond regular hours sometimes. The second red flag came when she started attending weekend conferences and training sessions in other cities. She would come back excited, which was weird, but her descriptions were always vague and unclear. 6 months ago, I noticed she had become very protective of her phone and other devices. She would keep her phone in her purse or pocket during dinner and leave the table to take calls. She never used to do that. She always took the calls in front of me. When I mentioned how often work interrupted our time together, she became defensive and said I didn't understand her job responsibilities. The breaking point came 4 weeks ago when she announced a 3-day leadership conference in a city where her bank had no branches. The first time she mentioned it, I did my research beforehand. That night, I decided I needed to find out what was happening during her mysterious trips. I contacted a private investigator the following morning and arranged a meeting to discuss some options. The investigator was a former police detective who specialized in infidelity cases and cheating spouses. The cost was high, but I needed definitive answers about whether my suspicions were correct. Instead of confronting her directly and giving her a chance to cover up or lie more, I decided to let her think she was fooling me. Meanwhile, the investigator would document her real activities during her supposed business trip. I had to act normal while knowing that professionals were watching her every move. 2 weeks before her conference, I told her that my company was sending me to training, which happened to be on the exact dates as her trip. This lie would allow me to stay in the area without raising her suspicions while the investigator did his work. I rented an Airbnb 40 minutes from our house, close enough to get updates, but far enough to avoid being seen. The morning she left for her conference, I kissed her goodbye and wished her luck, knowing I might not ever trust my wife again. She promised to text when possible, but warned that the intensive schedule might limit our communication. This convenient excuse for staying out of touch suggested she had planned every detail of whatever she was about to do. As I watched her drive away with far more luggage than needed for 3 days of meetings, I realized our marriage might already be over. The next 72 hours would either confirm my worst fears or give me a chance to rebuild trust in the relationship that had defined my entire adult life. 2 hours after my wife drove away for her supposed conference, I received the first phone call from the detective. He confirmed that surveillance had begun and that my wife was not heading toward the conference center she had mentioned. Instead, she had driven directly to the airport and parked in the long-term parking garage, behavior that immediately contradicted her story about a local conference. The private investigator explained that he had positioned himself to observe her without being detected. Within 30 minutes of arriving at the airport, my wife met a man at the departure gate who appeared to be in his early 50s with graying hair and an expensive suit. The investigator managed to capture several clear photographs of them embracing and kissing in ways that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The investigator's initial report indicated that they boarded a flight together. The evidence was already overwhelming, but the investigator assured me that he would continue documenting their activities to build an airtight case for divorce proceedings. I sat alone in the Airbnb, staring at the photographs on my phone that the private investigator had sent, feeling like my entire world had collapsed in a single afternoon. The man in the pictures was someone I had never seen before, which meant my wife had been maintaining a completely secret relationship for months or possibly years. The investigator called again that evening to provide an update on their activities at the resort, where they had checked into a luxury suite. The investigator was close enough to know that my wife's AP was paying for everything with cash, suggesting this was a well-planned affair rather than a spontaneous decision. Throughout the first night of surveillance, I barely slept as my mind raced through decades of memories, wondering how many other trips and excuses had been lies. The second day brought even more devastating revelations as the investigator documented their activities around the resort, including romantic dinners and intimate moments by the pool. By this point, I had moved beyond shock and anger into a cold determination to protect myself legally and financially from the fallout of her betrayal. I spent the afternoon researching divorce attorneys. The investigator's third phone call came with news that pissed me off. My wife and her companion had been joined by another couple at the resort. The investigator had identified the other woman as someone who worked in the same banking industry, though at a different institution across the state. On the final day of surveillance, the investigator called with his most damaging findings yet. He had overheard conversations indicating that this was not their first trip together. The couple spoke casually about previous vacations and future plans, suggesting a long-term relationship that had been carefully hidden from their respective spouses. My wife's companion mentioned his wife and children, making it clear that he was also betraying his family for this affair. The investigator had recorded these conversations using long-range audio equipment, providing even more evidence for legal proceedings. As I prepared to return home and confront the reality of my situation, the private investigator assured me that he had gathered enough documentation to support any legal action I chose to pursue. The photographs, recordings, and written reports would leave no room for denial or manipulation when the time came to end our marriage. I realized that my wife would return home expecting to continue her charade, completely unaware that her secret life had been thoroughly exposed. The woman who would walk through our front door in a few hours was essentially a stranger who had been using our marriage as cover for her true desires. 36 years of what I thought was a solid partnership had been revealed as an elaborate lie, and I would never be the same person who had kissed her goodbye 3 days earlier. When my wife returned home that evening, she walked through the door with the same confident smile she had worn for decades. She had no idea I knew what she was up to. She launched into all these stories she did while she was away for her job. She truly was blind to what I knew. Her performance was flawless, filled with specific details about banking regulations and industry trends that she had obviously researched to support her fabricated cover story. The level of preparation required for such elaborate deception suggested that lying had become second nature to her over the years. She even showed me business cards from supposed new contacts, though the investigator had already confirmed that these were fake credentials purchased online. As she unpacked her suitcase, I noticed that several expensive items of clothing were missing, probably gifts from her affair partner that she had left at the resort. Her casual mention of losing a favorite blouse to hotel laundry service was just another lie to explain the missing evidence of her romantic getaway. The next morning, I kept my composure and stayed cool while secretly meeting with the divorce attorney that the investigator had recommended for me. She reviewed the investigator's photographs, recordings, and written reports with the thoroughness of someone who had handled hundreds of similar cases. The attorney explained that the documentation was strong, but she wouldn't guarantee anything. However, she said that the evidence I gathered was the best she had seen in a long time, and made a comment that she wished everyone could come prepared. Her recommendation was to file for divorce immediately, while maintaining complete secrecy about my knowledge of the affair until the papers were officially served. This approach would prevent my wife from hiding assets, destroying evidence, or coordinating stories with her affair partner and their accomplices. I signed the divorce petition that afternoon, officially beginning the legal process that would end our 36-year marriage. The attorney arranged for a professional process server to serve my wife while she was at work. For the next 2 weeks, I continued to be the ignorant husband while secretly preparing for the devastation that was about to unfold. My wife remained completely confident in her deception, even planning another supposed business trip for the following month. The irony was almost unbearable. She thought she was manipulating me while I was orchestrating the destruction of her carefully constructed false reality. On a Tuesday morning, the process server lit her ass up with those divorce papers, with an official envelope marked "Legal Documents, Immediate Attention Required." Her assistant signed for the delivery and took it directly to the conference room where my wife was speaking with someone, or possibly one of her co-workers. The envelope contained divorce papers, the investigator's surveillance photographs, audio transcripts, and a detailed timeline of her affair activities. According to the process server's report, my wife looked as if she was about to faint as she opened the envelope and saw the first photograph of herself kissing her lover at the airport. She looked as if she was starting to panic as she flipped through dozens of images documenting every moment of their romantic resort getaway. The meeting room fell silent as her colleagues realized that something catastrophic was happening to their usually composed manager. She excused herself and rushed to her private office, but the damage was already done as word spread throughout the bank about the dramatic delivery. The investigator, who had been positioned nearby to document her reaction, captured photographs of her emotional breakdown as the reality of being caught finally hit her. Meanwhile, I sat in my insurance office, calmly handling client calls while knowing that my wife's world was collapsing in real time. My attorney called that afternoon to confirm that service had been completed successfully and that she expected my wife to hire her own attorney. The legal battle was officially underway, but as my attorney said, we held all the advantages thanks to the investigator's meticulous documentation of her infidelity. My wife finally called me that evening. She sounded like she had been crying as she tried to explain what she claimed was a misunderstanding that could be resolved through conversation. For the first time in our marriage, I hung up the phone without saying a word, knowing that nothing she could say would ever matter again. 11 months after serving my wife with divorce papers at her workplace, the legal proceedings had moved swiftly through the courts with devastating consequences for her on every front. The investigator's surveillance evidence proved so compelling that her attorney advised her to accept whatever settlement terms I offered rather than face a public trial. The photographs and recordings left no room for negotiation, and my attorney had structured the divorce to maximize my financial protection while minimizing any obligations to my unfaithful spouse. Within weeks of the papers being served, my wife's affair partner had been identified by his own family and faced his own divorce proceedings. His wife, armed with copies of the investigator's evidence, had frozen their joint accounts and secured primary custody of their 3 children. The ripple effects of their exposure destroyed not just our marriages, but an entire network of relationships they had built around their deception. My wife lost her position at the bank after her big boss determined that the cheating scandal had compromised her ability to represent the institution professionally. She was forced to move back in with her sister while searching for work that paid a fraction of her former salary. The expensive lifestyle she had maintained during our marriage became impossible without access to my income and benefits. Her affair partner faced similar professional consequences as his employer questioned his judgment and reliability after learning about his elaborate schemes to hide his adultery. The resort trips, fake conferences, and coordinated lies had required significant financial resources that his own family was now scrutinizing through forensic accounting. During our final court appearance, my wife sat across the courtroom looking like a completely different person than the confident bank manager who had kissed me goodbye that morning 11 months earlier. The judge awarded me the house and a portion of the savings, as well as part of the investment portfolio, while requiring her to assume responsibility for her own debts and legal fees. My lawyer has successfully argued that adultery constituted a breach of marital contract that justified unequal asset distribution in my favor. My wife received only her personal belongings and a small portion of our joint savings, barely enough to support herself for a few months. The alimony she had probably expected after 36 years of marriage was denied due to her proven infidelity and the court's finding of marital misconduct. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt relief rather than sadness, knowing that I was finally free from a relationship where she probably cheated with more than one person. I just happened to catch her this time. The woman I had supported through military service, career changes, and child rearing had repaid my loyalty with betrayal and deception. Our adult children initially struggled to understand why I had ended their parents' marriage so abruptly, but the investigator's evidence eventually convinced them of their mother's guilt. Both our son and daughter admitted they had noticed changes in her behavior over recent years, but had attributed them to work-related stress, not her cheating on me. They chose to maintain relationships with both parents, but acknowledged that her choices had permanently damaged their respect for their mother. The divorce taught me painful lessons about trust, commitment, and the reality that some people are simply incapable of honoring their promises. For 36 years, I had believed that marriage meant partnership, loyalty, and shared sacrifice, only to discover that my wife viewed it as a convenient cover for her true desires. The investigator's investigation had revealed not just one affair, but a pattern of deception that probably extended back years or even decades without my knowledge. How many business trips, training seminars, and work emergencies had actually been opportunities for her to pursue relationships with other men? A strange turn of events happened about 8 months after my divorce was finalized. My ex-wife had been arrested for check fraud after attempting to cash stolen checks from her elderly parents' account to pay for another vacation with a different man. Her affair partner had also been charged with embezzlement after his former employer discovered that he had been stealing company funds to finance his extramarital activities. Both of them now faced potential prison time, proving that their capacity for deception extended far beyond adultery into actual criminal conduct. As I reflected on the wreckage of what I had once considered a successful marriage, I wondered how many other men were living with similar lies without knowing it. The thought that marriage could provide security and companionship now seemed naive, given how easily trust could be betrayed by someone you had shared your entire adult life with. My story serves as a warning that even decades of apparent happiness and commitment mean nothing if your partner lacks fundamental integrity and honesty. No amount of love, support, or sacrifice can protect you from someone who views marriage as an opportunity for manipulation rather than genuine partnership. The private investigator's bill had been expensive, but it was the best money I ever spent because it saved me from wasting more years on someone who never deserved my devotion. Marriage might work for some people, but my experience suggests that the risks far outweigh any potential benefits when you consider how much you stand to lose. Well, in my opinion, especially in 2025, this cheating story serves as a reminder that marriage is risky these days and may end up bankrupting you if you are not careful. And I have always said long-term marriages are not immune to infidelity.